This is the shabby secret of the welfare statists' tirades against gold. Deficit spending is simply a scheme for the confiscation of wealth. Gold stands in the way of this insidious process. It stands as a protector of property rights. If one grasps this, one has no difficulty in understanding the statist antagonism toward the gold standard. Monday, January 20th, 2025, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. So, will the second Trump administration make America great again? Well, we're going to have to wait and see for that. But from the outside, not being an American and having studied American history for many, many years, I started out actually in Brazil, of all places, at the American School in Rio, and it was one of my favorite topics, and I've kept reading about American history ever since. But over the last 20 years, of course, I've been looking at the history of money, the history of gold, silver, and even copper, and the history of fiat currencies. And what we're going to cover today is that in order for the dollar to be great again, it has to be a weight of gold, a weight of silver, and a weight of copper. And I'm going to use Alan Greenspan's essay from 1967, Gold and Economic Freedom, to show you why gold is so important, but also silver and even copper for that matter. I'm going to refer to the Coinage Act of 1792. So what do I think is happening with, let's say, the Trump coin and Bitcoin and all the talk that the dollar is going to be saved, the fiat dollar, that is going to be saved by cryptocurrencies or Bitcoin? Well, I don't really buy much into that. And unfortunately, I think we need a complete move back to the Constitution, to the original intent of the Founding Fathers. Because what happened during the Revolutionary War was that, yes, faith was put on a fiat currency called the Continental, and of course that failed. And the Founding Fathers knew better that in order to have a small government, or government for the people, by the people, of the people, you needed gold and silver, a system that neutralized the bankers, because the bankers were the trouble. So I'm going to do quite a few things today. I'm going to also recommend a book about a man who paid off the national debt of the United States and actually slayed the bankers, or slayed the central bank, the second bank of the United States. So what I'm trying to say here, the only way to make America great again, in my opinion, is to make the dollar great again. And you can only do that when the dollar is real money. It's a weight of gold, a weight of silver, a weight of copper even, I would add. It might sound weird. People might be saying, well, it's never going to be money again. But I think again, and that's why I'm the home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Before I go further, just wanted to give a shout out to Dirty Men Safe. Yes, I think it's more important than ever to keep your valuables safe, and Dirty Men Safe is a good way of doing that. If you're interested, go below to the description of this video, click on the link, have a look, and if you use my link, if you buy it through there, you get a 10% discount on the Dirty Man Safe. So I'm going to start with this book here, the Guidebook of United States Coins by R.S. Yeoman. And it comes out every year. I got the 2024 edition. I got that at one of the coin expositions I went to here in London. I think it was in late 2023. They already had the 2024 book. And I'm going to go to page 13. And it says, on April 2nd, 1792, a bill was finally passed providing the money of account of the United States should be expressed in dollars or units, dimes or tenths, cents or hundredths, and mills or thousandths. A dime being a tenth part of a dollar, a cent the hundredth part of a dollar, a mill the thousandth part of a dollar. Denominations specified in the act were as follows. So I'm going to stop right here. Why was the dollar used? Why the name dollar? Well, because the Spanish dollar was the most popular coin in the colonies, and that's why they used the name dollar. And the Spanish dollar, of course, is a derivation, the name of Joachim's thaler, which was a coin that was minted, around the 1600s in Bohemia by someone called Joachim. One of the nobles in Bohemia minted that silver coin. It became really widespread. It became used everywhere. And the Spanish, they copied it the same weight, same kind of content. So here you go. It gives you what the gold, silver, and copper dollars should be. So let's go through it. I'm going to put it up here as well. So as I read, you can keep, you want to pause it and do a screenshot. Maybe get the 2025 one as well. It has all the information, all the US minted coins. It's really great. It gives you all the details about the coins, how rare they are. I highly recommend it if you are into this kind of stuff, of course. So Gold Eagle, the value is $10. How many grains of pure gold is a Gold Eagle? Well, according to the Act of 1792, was 247 and 4/8, so 247 and a half. Grains standard, 270. So that was the total weight of the coin. Of course, there were adjustments to the weight of the dollar throughout the decades, and that's something that Congress is supposed to do, regulate the value of the money. It's got nothing to do with the Federal Reserve controlling interest rates. That's what the Constitution says. And according to the oath that the President Trump will take today, or make today, he's supposed to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. So this is not something that would have to be passed again. This is part of the Constitution, right? So we have gold half eagle, so that's $5, and the amount of grains, pure grains, and grain standard. Then you have the gold quarter eagle, which is $2.50, of course. And you also, after the gold rush of 1849 in California, they started minting the double eagle, which of course is $20. And then you have here the silver dollar, $1. It's 371 and 4/16 grains pure. And then for copper, we go down to the cent. 1 cent or 1/100th of a dollar is supposed to be 264 grains of pure copper, and you even had half a cent. So there you go. That's what the dollar should be. What we have today, of course, the fiat dollar, is an abomination, I would say. It's like changing the value of the inch, the pound, or the yard every second, and having the bankers trade that 24/7. But I would say the reason this is important, and we're going to come to Greenspan's essay from 1967, is that if you have the common man or woman working hard and being paid in fiat dollars, over the years, those fiat dollars will be abused in that the government and the central bank will issue too many of them. They will dilute. It's just like a stock of a company. If you issue too many shares, you dilute that stock and it becomes worth less. And the unit of account of a country, in this case the United States dollar, is kind of the common stock of the country. So if you bash that common stock, you're going to make the common man poor as the years go along. The rich, of course, can always protect themselves versus inflation, because that's what it is. And I think that's what the founding fathers learned, and that's why they put that into the Constitution. And unfortunately, it's very hard. I think it was Benjamin Franklin who said at the end of the Constitutional Convention, when two ladies asked him, "What have we got, Mr. Franklin? A monarchy or a republic?" And he said, "A republic if you can, you have a republic, but if you can keep it for that long." And I don't think we have a republic anymore. I'm not sure that going to a Bitcoin reserve or a Trump coin or cryptocurrencies is the answer at all, because one of the things that gold and silver and copper even provide is privacy. The blockchain doesn't give you privacy. Blockchain is out in the open. The system will know everything that you're doing, and I think that's a big problem. So the second book I'm going to recommend is the biography by H.W. Brands of Andrew Jackson, his life and times. And why this book? Well, because Andrew Jackson was the last president to pay off the national debt. I think that was 1835. And then in 1836, the Second Bank of the United States had to close its doors because it didn't renew the charter of the Second Bank of the United States, which was a private central bank, mostly controlled by Mr. Biddle, and probably ultimately controlled by the Rothschilds in London. So for 77 years, America didn't have a central bank. Of course, with the Lincoln administration during the Civil War, or the war between the states, the legal tender law was passed as well. And that was a step in the wrong direction, because did you know that up until then, even though the unit of account of the United States was the dollar, you could use any coinage from anywhere around the world to pay private debts, at least. So with the legal tender laws, it greatly reduced the choice that people had to pay for things. So it's ironic that Andrew Jackson, he slayed the central bank, Second Bank of the United States, and yet the Federal Reserve has put him on the $20 well, it's not even $20, is it? There's nothing backing this. $20 is should be a weight of gold, but I'm not sure he would have been if he could come back and see his face on a Federal Reserve note. I don't think he'd be very happy with that, and that's why, in my opinion, unless the Federal Reserve Act of 1913 is abolished, nothing will change, and that's why I think they're trying to keep things going. But by keeping things going, they just keep this massive national debt that's been created and has been like going astronomically ever since 1971. Going, yes, of course, there are a lot of people who are dependent on this national debt. It's kind of the social contract and the New Deal, which in my opinion is also something unconstitutional. And I do admit that there would be a lot of trouble. It would be a huge crisis if the current fear dollar were to collapse. But I think it's already collapsing in terms of purchasing power. I mean, we've gotten to a point where everything is really difficult. But what does the book say about Andrew Jackson? Well, let's quickly go through this book. I read it quite a few years ago, but I highly recommend it. It says the most famous American of his time. Andrew Jackson is a seminal figure in American history, the first common man to rise to the presidency. Jackson embodied the spirit and the vision of the emerging American nation. The term Jacksonian democracy is embedded in our national lexicon. Well, one interesting thing about Andrew Jackson is that he fought as a boy in the Revolutionary War. It says here, it says he risked execution to free the Carolinas of the British during the Revolutionary War. And of course, he became really famous with the rout of the British at the Battle of New Orleans during the War of 1812. And that War of 1812 had a lot to do as well with the first Bank of the United States. So Andrew Jackson knew the power of the bankers and how they controlled the United Kingdom or Great Britain. And yeah, I think he was the last president who, slayed the central bankers, the power of the bankers. But we'll have to wait and see if Trump is going to do the same. I'm not too sure. I would be a lot more optimistic if Ron Paul were the president. He would definitely end the Fed. But anyway, let's go through Alan Greenspan's essay about why gold is so important. Gold and economic freedom. And I know Alan Greenspan was chairman of the Federal Reserve. You can argue that he switched sides. But when I spoke to Ron Paul back in 2002 at the Mises Institute, he told me that Alan Greenspan autographed this essay for him. And he asked Greenspan, do you still believe in that? And he said, I believe 100% in it. But he said at the same time, politically, people want the inflation. And that's what he said. If the people want the inflation, that's what they're going to get. So, gold and economic freedom, Alan Greenspan, 1967. An almost hysterical antagonism toward the gold standard is one issue which unites statists of all persuasions. They seem to sense perhaps more clearly and subtly than many consistent defenders of laissez-faire that gold and economic freedom are inseparable, that the gold standard is an instrument of laissez-faire, that each implies and requires the other. In order to understand the source of their antagonism, it is necessary first to understand the specific role of gold in a free society. Money is the common denominator of all economic transactions. It is that commodity which serves as a medium of exchange, is universally acceptable to all participants in an exchange economy as payment for their goods or services, and can therefore be used as a standard of market value and as a store of value, i.e., a means of saving. And you might argue Bitcoin could do that, or Trump coin, or Dogecoin. And yes, you could be right. And that's why we don't need legal tender laws. Let the market decide what the market wants to use as money and as currency. It was the way in the United States prior to the Legal Tender Act of 1862. So I'm not saying that you can't use Bitcoin or anything else, but what I'm trying to say is that gold has the track record. But anyway, let's continue. And I think gold is more of a privacy coin than Bitcoin will ever be. The existence of such a commodity is a precondition of a division of labor economy. If a man did not have some commodity of objective value, which was generally acceptable as money, they would have to resort to primitive barter or be forced to live on self-sufficient farms and forego the inestimable advantages of specialization. If men had no means to store value, i.e., to save, neither long-range planning nor exchange would be possible. Very important. Saving is probably the most important factor in capitalism. It's not debt. We've been conditioned to believe that debt is the way forward, but I think that's completely warped and upside down. What medium of exchange will be acceptable to all participants in an economy is not determined arbitrarily. First, the medium of exchange should be durable. In a primitive society of meager wealth, wheat might be sufficiently durable to serve as a medium, since all exchanges would occur only during and immediately after the harvest, leaving no value surplus to store. But where store value considerations are important, as they are in richer, more civilized societies, the medium of exchange must be a durable commodity, usually a metal. A metal is generally chosen because it is homogeneous and divisible. Every unit is the same as every other, and it can be blended or formed in any quantity. Precious jewels, for example, are neither homogeneous nor divisible. More important, the commodity chosen as a medium must be a luxury. Human desires for luxuries are unlimited, and therefore luxury goods are always in demand and will always be acceptable. Wheat is a luxury in underfed civilizations, but not in a prosperous society. Cigarettes ordinarily would not serve as money, but they did in post-World War II Europe, where they were considered a luxury. The term luxury good implies scarcity and high unit value. Having a high unit value, such a good is easily portable. For instance, an ounce of gold is worth a half ton of pig iron. In the early stages of a developing money economy, several media of exchange might be used, since a wide variety of commodities would fulfill the foregoing conditions. However, one of the commodities will gradually displace all others by being more widely acceptable. Preferences on what to hold as a store of value will shift to the most widely acceptable commodity, which in turn will make it still more acceptable. The shift is progressive until that commodity becomes the sole medium of exchange. The use of a single medium is highly advantageous for the same reasons that a money economy is superior to a barter economy. It makes exchanges possible on an incalculably wider scale. Whether the single medium is gold, silver, seashells, cattle, or tobacco is optional, depending on the context and development of a given economy. In fact, all have been employed at various times as media of exchange. Even in the present century, two major commodities, gold and silver, have been used as international media of exchange, with gold becoming the predominant one. Gold, having both artistic and functional uses and being relatively scarce, has significant advantages over all media of exchange. Since the beginning of World War I, it has been virtually the sole international standard of exchange. If all goods and services were to be paid for in gold, large payments would be difficult to execute, and this would tend to limit the extent of a society's division of labor specialization. Thus, a logical extension of the creation of a medium of exchange is the development of a banking system and credit instruments, banknotes and deposits, which act as a substitute but are convertible into gold. I would add silver as well, but anyway, let's keep going. A free banking system based on gold is able to extend credit and thus create banknotes, currency, and deposits according to the production requirements of the economy. Individual owners of gold are induced by payments of interest to deposit their gold in a bank against which they can draw checks. But since it is rarely the case that all depositors want to withdraw all their gold at the same time, the banker need to keep only a fraction of this total deposits in gold as reserves. Well, yeah, that's the fractional reserve mechanism. I'm not too sure I agree with him on that completely, but the convertibility is really what matters. This enables the banker to loan out more than the amount of his gold deposits, which means that he holds claims to gold rather than gold as a security to his deposit. But that amount of loans which he can afford to make is not arbitrary. He has to gauge it in relation to his reserves and the status of his investments. When banks loan money to finance productive and profitable endeavors, the loans are paid off rapidly and bank credit continues to be generally available. But when business ventures financed by bank credit are less profitable and slow to pay off, bankers soon find that their loans outstanding are excessive relative to their gold reserves, and they begin to curtail new lending, usually by charging higher interest rates. This tends to restrict the financing of new ventures and requires the existing borrowers to improve their profitability before they can obtain credit for further expansion. Thus, under the gold standard, a free banking system stands as the protector of an economy's stability and balanced growth. None of the Keynesian interventionism, of course. So let's continue, and I'm going to put a link to this below in the description if you want to read it as well. He says, when gold is accepted as the medium of exchange by most or all nations, an unhampered free international gold standard serves to foster a worldwide division of labor and the broadest international trade, even though the units of exchange, the dollar, the pound, the franc, etc., differ from country to country. When all are defined in terms of gold, the economies of different countries act as one. so long as there are no restraints on trade or on the movement of capital. Credit, interest rates, and prices tend to follow similar patterns in all countries. For example, if banks in one country extend credit too liberally, interest rates in that country will tend to fall, inducing depositors to shift their goal to higher interest-paying banks in other countries. This will immediately cause a shortage of bank reserves in the easy money country, inducing tighter credit standards and a return to a competitively higher interest rates again. A fully free banking system and fully consistent gold standard have not as yet been achieved. Prior to World War I, the banking system in the United States and in most of the world was based on gold. And even though governments intervened occasionally, banking was more free than controlled. Periodically, as a result of overly rapid credit expansion, banks became loaned up to the limit of their gold reserves. Interest rates rose sharply. New credit was cut off and the economy went into a sharp but short-lived recession. Compared with the depressions of 1920 and 32, the pre-World War I business declines were mild indeed. It was limited gold reserves that stopped the unbalanced expansions of business activity before they could develop into the post-World War I type of disaster. The readjustment periods were short and the economies quickly reestablished a sound basis to resume expansion. But the process of cure was misdiagnosed as the disease. If shortage of bank reserves was causing a business decline, argued economic interventionists, why not find a way of supplying increased reserves to the banks so they never need be short? If banks can continue to loan money indefinitely, it was claimed, there need never be any slumps in business. And so the Federal Reserve System was organized in 1913. It consisted of 12 regional Federal Reserve banks, nominally owned by private bankers, but in fact government-sponsored, controlled, and supported. Credit extended by these banks is in practice, though not legally, backed by the taxing power of the federal government. Technically, we remained on the gold standard. Individuals were still free to own gold, and gold continued to be used as bank reserves. But now, in addition to gold, credit extended by the Fed Reserve banks, paper reserves, could serve as legal tender to pay depositors. When business in the United States underwent a mild contraction in 1927, the Federal Reserve created more paper reserves in the hope of forestalling any possible bank reserve shortage. More disastrous, however, was the Fed's attempt to assist Great Britain, who had been losing gold to us because the Bank of England refused to allow interest rates to rise when market forces dictated, because it was politically unpalatable. Sounds familiar? The reasoning of the authorities involved was as follows. If the Fed pumped excessive paper reserves into American banks, interest rates in the U.S. would fall to a level comparable to those in Great Britain. This would act to stop Britain's gold loss and avoid the political embarrassment of having to raise rates. The Fed succeeded. It stopped the gold loss, but it nearly destroyed the economies of the world in the process. The excess credit which the Fed pumped into the economy spilled over into the stock market. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Triggering a fantastic speculative boom. Belatedly, the Fed officials attempted to sop up excess reserves and finally succeeded in breaking the boom. But it was too late. By 1929, the speculative imbalances had become so overwhelming that the attempt precipitated a sharp retrenching and a consequent demoralizing of business confidence. As a result, the American economy collapsed. Great Britain fared even worse. and rather than absorb the full consequences of her previous folly, she abandoned the gold standard completely in 1931, tearing asunder what remained of the fabric of confidence and inducing a worldwide series of bank failures. The world economies plunged into a Great Depression of the 1930s. We're almost there, but I think it's really important, and hopefully you'll have some more time today to listen to me. With a logic reminiscent of a generation earlier, statists argued that the gold standard was largely to blame for the credit debacle which led to the Great Depression. If the gold standard had not existed, they argued, Britain's abandonment of gold payments in 1931 would not have caused the failure of banks all over the world. The irony was that since 1913, we had been not on a gold standard, but on what may be termed a mixed standard, yet it is gold that took the blame. But the opposition to the gold standard in any form from a growing number of welfare state advocates was prompted by a much subtler insight, the realization that the gold standard is incompatible with chronic deficit spending, the hallmark of the welfare state. Stripped of its academic jargon, the welfare state is nothing more than a mechanism by which governments confiscate the wealth of the productive members of a society to support a wide variety of welfare schemes. A substantial part of the confiscation is effected by taxation, but the welfare statists were quick to recognize that if they wished to retain political power, the amount of taxation had to be limited, and they had to resort to programs of massive deficit spending, i.e., they had to borrow money. By issuing government bonds to finance welfare expenditures on a large scale, under a gold standard, the amount of credit that an economy can support is determined by the economy's tangible assets. Since every credit instrument is ultimately a claim on some tangible asset, but government bonds are not backed by tangible wealth, only by the government's promise to pay out future tax revenues, and cannot be easily absorbed by the financial markets. A large volume of new government bonds can be sold to the public only at progressively higher interest rates. Thus, government deficit spending under a gold standard is severely limited. The abandonment of the gold standard made it possible for the welfare statists to use the banking system as a means to an unlimited expansion of credit. They have created paper reserves in the form of government bonds, which through a complex series of steps, the banks accept in place of tangible assets and treat as if they were actual deposits, i.e. as the equivalent what was formerly a deposit of gold. So you can see why gold is such a threat to this system. The holder of a government bond or of a bank deposit created by paper reserves believes that he has a valid claim on a real asset, but the fact is that there are now more claims outstanding than real assets. The law of supply and demand is not to be conned. As the supply of money of claims increases relative to the supply of tangible assets in the economy, prices must eventually rise. Thus, the earnings saved by productive members of the society lose value in terms of goods. When the economy's books are finally balanced, one finds that this loss in value represents goods purchased by the government for welfare and other purposes with the money proceeds of the government bonds financing by bank credit expansion. So we're almost there. In the absence of the gold standard, there's no way to protect savings from confiscation through inflation. There is no safe store value. If there were, the government would have to make its holding illegal, as was done in the case of gold. Of course, at that time that he wrote this, it was still so. If everyone decided, for example, to convert all his bank deposits to silver or copper or any other good, and and thereafter declined to accept checks as payments for goods, bank deposits would lose their purchasing power and government-created bank credit would be worthless as a claim on goods. The financial policy of the welfare state requires that there be no way for the owners of wealth to protect themselves. Finally, this is the shabby secret of the welfare statists' tirades against gold. Deficit spending is simply a scheme for the confiscation of wealth. Gold stands in the way of this insidious process. It stands as a protector of property rights. If one grasps this, one has no difficulty in understanding the statist antagonism toward the gold standard. So there you go. I'm going to end it right here. And I wish all my viewers in the US a great day. And let's hope this is the dawn of a new era. But at the end of the day, you need to look after your own affairs. You should not depend on one man or woman to save you, I would say. So there you go. With that, I'm going to wish you all a very good day. Take care. Bye.